Hello, this is Head to Head on uatv, and I am Olis Gardyuk. While reforming the law enforcement agencies, Ukraine declared a large-scale goal to put an end to the illegal pressure on business by these agencies and to investigate economic crimes with the help of analytical tools. In order to implement this, the Ukrainian parliament is considering the creation of the National Bureau of Financial Security to replace the existing bodies. The bills on the matter have already been submitted to Ukraine's parliamentary body, the Verkhovna Rada, and to discuss this, we welcome to the studio Eugene Krapivin, an expert on law enforcement reform at the Reanimation Package of Reforms group. Hello, and thank you for being with us today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So, Mr. Krapivin, what are these executive or law enforcement bodies that this new institution would replace if the reform is actually going into force?
Well, I hope that this reform will go into force in this short time. And now we have 3 different law enforcement agencies which investigate such crimes as covering taxes, like avoiding to pay taxes, or some fictive business activity for covering some illegal actions, and so on. So now we have tax police, now we have Department of Financial Security of National Police, and even more, we have Department of Economic Intelligence, some kind of intelligence in the State Security Service. Mm-hmm. So it's 3 different bodies with different level of powers, and one of the views by experts that they all should be united in one, and it will be much more efficient, predictable, and it's not a good situation when we have such 3 bodies. First of all, what about the intelligence? Because it's heritage of the 90s, of the Soviet times, because now that we have tax police, economic intelligence is not necessary in our country nowadays.
But how is it going to be more efficient? Do they develop some different tools to counter the economic crimes?
Mm-hmm. Well, the conception, the model is much more opposite than we have now, because now it's tax police investigates these crimes with some kind of searches, with using power units, with some temporary temporary actions with accountatory documents, with another documents, and so on. So they usually go to the company, make search, give what they need, and then they could paralyze the work of this company for weeks, months, or even years while they investigate this crime. And what is the new model? That we use some analytical methods, some analytical component. Firstly, we register the criminal proceeding, then we prepare some analytical note without any searches, power units, and so on. And in only way that we see that this is a big fish, like it's not a small business, little company, it's a real huge company which avoid taxes and makes real damage to the budget of Ukraine, real damage to the economic of Ukraine. Only in this way we use this traditional criminal methods, like traditional by CPC, like again searches, power units, acquisition, and so on. So what is analytical method is it's again using the public information, using the databases, and so on.
To dig more into the case.
Yeah, unfortunately, now we use some old violent methods without any new technologies, and it's again one of necessary steps in reform on law enforcement agencies at all. Not just financial police or tax police. It is a huge step for police, because we give away from them these functions. It's not a necessary function for them, and again we ruin it with this. We decline this intelligence in state service.
Well, you mentioned that this analysis would be conducted before the actual searches for with the big business and big companies. What is going to be done about the small companies? What measures?
Well, small companies, it's a good question, because if there are not enough amount of money which avoided from taxation, it's not a crime. And now, again, what is the problem? The tax police using these violent methods, searches, then when they using this accountant documentary and other documents, they understand that there is not enough money to criminalize this, and as a result, they just close the criminal proceeding, and this is all. So mostly tax police using the criminal mechanisms to make illegal pressure on the small business, even not legal. It's illegal pressure when they just blackmailing them, they ask them for money, and it's a very big sphere of corruption in our country. And again, small business, they do not have enough money to have a real efficient legislative support to defend them in court, and they do not have access to some media, some internet resources to make this situation public. For example, we have had several months ago situation with Nova Pochta. It's a big corporation, and they using their resources make some public attention for this situation. Even organized a meeting with General Prosecutor Yuri Lutsenko, and we see that it's different levels when huge companies under pressure of tax police, and small companies. We do not see them just because they are so small and do not have resources to defend themselves. Again, it's some illegal actions that we maybe cannot avoid at all, but decrease in a huge way.
Well, on one hand, police and law enforcement officers right now, they might act illegally, right, with these procedures. On the other hand, after this reform, is it possible that small businesses will start avoiding paying taxes, basically, if there is not going to be any procedure to open the criminal case?
Well, I think that this is not the consequence of this reform. Maybe it will be some temporary period when we try to build new system. But as a result, I think that this mechanism will really be efficient, because again, we're interested in investigate some big fish, some big taxes which may have huge damage to the budget, not a small business. But of course, if small business avoiding taxes on the concrete amount of money, which is crime, of course they will accuse it by the government and investigated by the new body. Maybe it will be National Bureau of State Security or Financial Police. We have different models, different names for that.
Yeah, and actually currently there are 3 bills submitted to the Parliament for consideration, and 2 of them propose to create the National Bureau of Financial Security, and the 3rd one to create financial police, the one you mentioned. Could you describe some specifics of these bills?
Well, what is the common of these bills, and it's really a good thing that we unite 3 different bodies to one, to the financial police or national bureau. It's not, the name is not necessary. And I should mention that it's not the reforms that we started after Euromaidan. It's reforms that we started in 2008. In 2008, we have conception of the reform of criminal justice, and under this conception, we should create national police, we should create anti-corruption body, we should create military police and financial police. And now, as we know, in 2015 we created national police, in 2015 we created a National Anti-Corruption Bureau, then we created a military prosecutor's office, which is separate body of general prosecutor's office, and they makes this function of of military police. And just one of body which not created by this conception is financial police. So it's a logical result of this 10 years reform of criminal justice sector. So according to this conception, in 2016, government prepared their own view. It's called State Financial Investigative Service. In some we do not know in what way it disappeared in some moment, and in Parliament we now we see Nina Yuzhanina's National Bureau of National Security with huge support of President.
Her bill is supported by President.
Just not 3 bills. Previously we had huge one before, but unfortunately it disappeared from any medias, any levels of work. So yes, now in May we have 3 different bills. Nina Yuzhanina's, another 2 by Andriy Zhurzi and Tatiana Ostrikova. It's a member of parliament from Samopomich. And really, what is the problem that first of them, Nina Yuzhanina's, is not so good as they positioned it. Why?
Then why President supports it?
Yeah, why President supports it? Because President has a huge influence to that body will have in future. Because
that body will be subordinate to the President, basically.
Not formally, not technically, but in practice, it will subordinated by President. So what is the difference? That another 2 draft reforms they make some real key points that makes it much better. And what is more, we have some obligations, some requirements by G7, by International Monetary Fund. And in draft of law, Nina Yuzhanina's, they do not mention, they do not.
So this draft law doesn't meet the requirements.
Yeah. What is the requirements?
It
should be, first of all, civil body. It's civil body in the system of executive government, which coordinated by Ministry of Finance and under the government, under the cabinet of ministers. So again, in the Nina Yuzhanina's draft of law, it's a separate body from any branches of government, not judicial.
But it's a law enforcement body, basically.
Yeah, but in our country, it could be in the same way law enforcement and civil. So it's different legal statuses. So there's another one requirements from the international organizations and countries is again the avoiding of duplication of functions. So this united in the one body, it prescribed by Tatiana Ostrikova, by Andriy Zhurzi, by alternative draft of laws, and unfortunately Nina Yuzhanina do not prohibited to investigate the crimes by this another bodies like national police and state security service. So of course she thinks that it's not the it not should be regulation of the draft of law, but really in our country when Parliament voted for this variant, we can stay in the situation when again we will have 3 different bodies with duplication of functions, and no one understands what powers will have every one of them. Another point again about the power units, because civil body should not have power units, special units.
You mean force?
Yeah, units. Like force, like units that use force while investigators make some searches and so on. So again, Nina Yuzhanina, draft of law of Nina Yuzhanina has this special units to use force. Another one, alternative one, do not have, and it's really huge problem, because now again the model of investigate these crimes is to make search, to use force, to frighten the companies by this special units with weapons, with armor, and so on. And it's a keynote for the G7 and International Monetary Fund. And again, alternative draft of laws, they have such in Ukrainian reality such important things as quotas for former officers, for former employees of these bodies like tax police, because again, when we create now new law enforcement bodies like a National Anti-Corruption Bureau or State's Bureau of Investigations, one more reform, we make some quotas for former employees. For example, Andriy Zhurzi, he proposed to make 100% quota for the former employees which worked under the Yanukovych regime. I mean, until the 2010, the last 8 years. So,
but this is important for the former workers of these organizations, not for the population in general.
Yeah, of course. But again, we see by the process of attestation in national police, by the process of reform in prosecutor's office, that traditional mechanisms of internal security, of investigation of crimes or disciplinary offenses by the workers of these law enforcement agencies, they do not work. They still do not work in our country. So this filter, these quotas should be before the competition to this body, and in some way, maybe not 100%, but 20% or 30%, it should be, I think.
Well, thank you so much for your opinion. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for, but thanks again for this conversation. This was Eugene Krapivin, an expert at Reanimation Package of Reforms Group. Thank you for watching Head to Head, and stay tuned with UATV.